Well, folks, as you can see, I have somebody new on the screen. His name is Roger, and he's known as the Peaceful Poet, and he lives in Oklahoma City. And he has had, like me, an interesting exploratory past where he's bounced around in all sorts of spiritual and religious groups. So I'm going to let him tell his story, and this is our first video together. And Roger, take it away.
All right, thanks. Yeah, I found out about Ron from an organization that was put in place that was supposed to take over everything because the government is unconstitutional.
Oh, Swiss Indo?
I'm sorry, what's that?
Were you Swiss Indo?
Wasn't like the Republic? Something?
Oh, the Republic movement. Okay, because I've been involved in lots of things.
So that's where I found out about Ron, and I tried to join the organization myself, but it all fell apart before I can get into it. And I suspect that I'm sure that CIA had gotten in there and infiltrated and did their thing as they always do. But that's how I found out about Ron, and I've been watching his videos ever since. When I can, I haven't seen them all, but when I can.
I don't think anybody has except me.
Yeah, you make one every day. That's pretty good. They're short and sweet, though. That's pretty good. But that's how I came aware of him. And Ron's an awfully religious person, like myself. And so I think
I use the term spiritual. Religious is a different meaning for me, but that's okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, a lot of people do. My interpretation of religion is a little bit different. I believe that religion is an attempt to intervene with the spiritual world. And that's basically what it is. And everybody has a different idea or a different way of doing it. And that's why we have all these different religions. There's a lot of fake stuff out there, a lot of bad stuff out there in religion. And that's what gives it a bad name. But I find it very interesting and fascinating. I've studied all the major religions. And what I do is when I find something that's the same here, and the same there, and the same somewhere else, then I consider that a truth. And the rest is, well, we can believe what you can take it or leave it. But
well, loving each other is, to me, the key truth in all of them. And they all teach it in some way or another.
Yep, exactly. And
but they don't practice it.
No, no, not everybody practices it. And I found that it really doesn't matter what a person believes. Good people will believe bad things, and bad people will believe good things. It really doesn't make a lot of difference on how a person acts. A caring person will always be a caring person, and an uncaring person, well, unless they change, become converted, and that does happen sometimes. Like the story of the Birdman from Alcatraz is a very good example. His mother worked hard for him her whole life, trying to keep him from the electric chair. And finally, before he died, he converted and became a really good man and helped out the birds, helped to save birds' lives. It's a very interesting story. So it does happen. But normally, good people are good and bad people are bad. It really doesn't matter what they believe.
Yeah, there are some interesting stories of transformation, and some of them resonate with me, and some less so.
Mm-hmm.
And right now, I mean, I know people in third world countries that are really trying to turn things around in a positive way, especially in Africa for the orphans. But it makes it really hard to be benevolent in a world where the leaders seem so malevolent and predisposed toward controlling everything and making sure that the lower class does not get enabled to do positive things.
Yeah, I think this is where I think me and Ron probably agree the most, is there is an evil in this world, and people we don't want to talk about it. And I can understand that. It's kind of a depressing subject, but it's something that really should be researched and should be studied. It seems that evil is the controlling force in this world. And those of us who aren't evil, we just sort of live here protected. Some of us not so protected, but we sort of live here and survive. and that's really about the way it is. And a lot of Muhammad taught about the Dajjal, as they're called, and he taught quite a bit about the Dajjal, and Jesus teaches us about the Antichrist, and there's a lot of misinformation out there, and there's a lot of true information out there, and it's really is hard to tell what is true and what is false, and it's a very, but that's something that we should research. That's something we should know about. And
do you follow David Icke at all? Have you listened
Yes.
to any of his things?
Yes, I like David Icke. Yeah,
Me too. I don't think he's 100. I don't agree with him 100% of the time, but most of the time I do.
Yeah, I think he's onto something, and he got really ridiculed and stuff.
Oh, indeed.
As those of us who believe in conspiracies, as they call it, or they call us conspiracy theorists. But it's not wrong to believe things, or maybe not believe things, but listen to things and question them. And just because it's not mainstream media, and mainstream media is like, and I think more people are learning, people are waking up, and they're realizing that mainstream media is full of it. I know at work, that's the only time I watch the news really is at work, and me and my buddy will watch it together, and we'll just shake our head here and there because they just don't tell the truth about hardly anything.
Well, I go to a meeting on Friday nights, and not all the time, but lots of times, the Fox News is on when I get to the meeting, and the people that are there early, and I'm usually one of the first ones there most of the time, and Fox News is on, so we get to watch our dose of Fox News.
Yeah, Fox News unfortunately has become the most popular because they're telling the more truth than other ones are. But
it's still controlled media.
Yeah, it's still controlled. Yeah. They won't. There's some things they won't tell you. They won't talk about, and there are things going on that are just like something that I'm researching right now is the magnetic waves that are surrounding the Earth. They appear to be collapsing and reversing, and nobody's talking about that. Though the information is out there. You can research it and find it, but nobody's talking about it. And it's happening now.
Well, there's all sorts of energetic shifts that seem to be occurring, not just in the magnetism, but in, the whole energy of the solar system or the energy around the Earth. There's something going on that seems to be an anomaly from what we've known as the standard, in previous decades.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the solar minimum. I think that's what you're referring to. That's starting as well. So we got that's now there's some talk about that in not maybe the mainstream media, but your more conservative side of the media. There's some talk about that there. You can find it there, but yeah, that's happening as well. As a matter of fact, they claim that it's already started, from what I've researched, it's supposed to last us for about 50 years, but some are out there saying it'll last us 1,000 years. I don't know.
And neither do I.
Well, but yeah, if you want to know the truth about anything, you got to dig, because it's just not going to come right out at you. And especially now from Google, when you do a Google search, what pops right up usually is the mainstream news media sites. And so you got to dig down to find the real meat of the issue. Whereas in the past, you'd find people's blogs and stuff like that, but now you got to dig for it.
Yeah, I noticed that even Yahoo, they want me to join some new thing or agree to some new contract with them.
Privacy agreement.
I haven't done that yet. I keep not doing it. I just keep ignoring it.
Mm-hmm.
But I have some of my communication is on yahoo.com, and I may have to drop that. But I also have Gmail accounts, and am I going to have to drop those too? I don't know.
Yeah, Gmail is awfully. Their email is very. It's easy, user friendly, so it's kind of hard to get rid of.
Yeah, well, it's Google.
I'm thinking about it myself too. a lot of work, but I'm thinking about it.
Yeah.
And trying to get out of YouTube as well, but but there really isn't. I'm hoping maybe Apple will be a competition to YouTube, but I haven't heard anything.
Apple is just as much part of the system as the the PCs and stuff like that. I mean, it's still a control grid. I mean, I have friends that have been telling me for years, "You've got to get an Apple. You've got to get an Apple." But I still have a PC because Apples have always been a few $100s at least more expensive for an equivalent computer. So I go with cost because I've never tried to become rich.
Yeah. Once a company reaches a certain size, apparently because Google was good at one time, but once they reach that certain size, that's it. I think after they join after they get so big that they can join Wall Street, I think that's where it breaks. I think because that's the evil component.
Well, the monetary component is the evil component. Everything is not about money. Money is and always has been a means of controlling people without putting chains around their wrists and legs. And visible slavery. It's an invisible form of slavery.
Yeah, and I think it controls our governments more than our media won't talk about it at all, but more than people will admit. But it controls our governments, and we're hearing the term now because people are waking up of. Now I can't think of it now. The interstate, or the in-state, or the part of the government that's not voted for.
The deep state.
Deep state, that's it. Yeah, because I was just talking to my mom about this morning. She says, "Have you heard of the deep state?" And I says, "Yeah, it's a term that most of us usually was aware of, but now other people are talking about it."
The people that we elect are figureheads. They're just the public persona of a much darker establishment that, like the Rothschilds. But David Icke says that it's not even the Rothschilds; it's the jinn or the demons, or it's not any race of people on earth that we can identify. It's a spiritual force. Yeah,
and it's like you can't really put a name to it. You really can't put a name to it, but people are trying. But even when you try, it kind of throws you off because it's not the Rothschild family. The Rothschild family, from what I've done some research, they don't even own their own bank anymore. They're just a stockholder like everybody else.
And that name is a conjured name. They were known as the Bowers.
Correct.
And Rothschild just means red shield because when they had their institutions, they had a red shield as like a logo. And they became known as the Rothschilds or the Red Shield, but they're the owners of the financial establishment that has, spread from Europe to the Americas, and basically they have infiltrated the entire world to some degree. There is some resistance, mostly in Muslim countries.
Yeah, and the new electronic money that's coming out is sort of, I'm not so sure about that yet because they have talked about that eventually we'll go to that monetary system that's electronic. The Muslims have been talking about that like 10 years ago. So I'm not so sure if I'm real confident in it, but it is at least a competition to the Rothschild system.
Well, if it exists only online, it can disappear just as easily as it appears. Because there's nothing tangible of value, like at least gold and silver and some of those things are something that you can hold in your hand, although even that's questionable.
Yeah, if we have that great EMP, it's gone. It's unfortunate. But then so will paper money and everything else. So it'll be a different world if that ever happens. And it could happen, large part of our world, but it could happen because of the magnetic waves and the cold front that's coming in. It'll cause earthquakes and volcanoes, which is already starting to happen in Hawaii there.
Yeah, well, that's what I had recorded the video with my friend Valentine, and then I didn't have any room. It couldn't save it because there was not enough room on C drive, and I had forgotten to delete my. I had already copied them to the my backup disk, but I hadn't deleted the backup files yet, and that was a whole month of videos plus half a month this month, and it just overcrowded C drive. But I didn't know my videos were on C drive. I thought they were on the backup D drive, which is on the same computer. But anyway, that's another story.
Yeah, I made a comment about that on your latest video just before we got started here. But yeah, I would have liked to see that, because I did read an article where they did talk about there is a possibility that there'll be a 9+ earthquake, and that somebody is predicting that anyways, and that could cause a tsunami. And you talked about that in your last video.
Yeah,
so
it hit the west coast of the Americas, or North America, pretty hard. I mean, there would be some flooding in Hawaii too, but that's east of where it would happen, and the main tidal wave would travel east from the west, not west from, not going toward Japan. Anyway.
Well, anyway, so I guess I didn't answer your question or describe how my belief in all different religions ever started. Most of my life, I have been searching for salvation, and I can't really honestly tell you why, except that I remember before I was born, and maybe that's all part of it, which I had maybe another time, maybe I'll tell that story, because I'm sure you like to keep your videos short. But so I have joined just about every church you can imagine, from Mormon to Baptist to Catholic, and then one morning I just woke up and said to myself, who condemned me? And that's why am I searching for salvation? And that's when I just decided I would just throw away everything that I've ever learned, everything that I've ever been taught, and not that it's all false, but that I would just question everything and completely start over. And I've studied all the major religions, and of course at that time, this was in about 1988, 87. The internet wasn't real big back then, so I might have been able to learn more now than I could then. I had to depend on the library back then. But I've studied all of Confucius. I've studied Buddhism, Hinduism, and the Gnostic religion. And I've read all the Gnostic scriptures that are available. And that was educational, extremely educational. And then I came to a point where I decided that the Gnostic religion was the true religion. That's the one I fell on. I decided that was it. And that the Gnostics believe that the false God created the physical world, and that the true God created the spiritual world, and that our soul was a creation of the true God, and our body is a creation of the false God. And this is what the Gnostics believed. And because they supposedly believed in two gods, which you really can't say they did, they really only believed in one, but one was false. But because of that, they were completely wiped off the earth by the Christians, the Jews, and the Muslims at that time. They were just completely wiped off the earth. And a lot of their scriptures were destroyed. So we don't really know the full story of the Gnostics.
Except in the Dead Sea Scrolls, they found some of them in a more modern period of time.
Correct.
The recovery of a lot of the Gnostic writings.
Right, yeah. Yeah, the Dead Sea Scrolls. And a lot of Christians will question that, because it's not a part of the Bible, the sanctioned book. But
it's ironic, because the sanctioned Bible mentions some of the Gnostic writings in its approved versions.
That's
like
true.
The Book of Enoch. That's a Gnostic book.
Correct.
And it refers to it in the Bible, for example.
Yeah, there's the because the Book of Enoch was found in both the Gnostic library and the Dead Sea Scrolls. So that's a deal breaker there. And some even say that Jesus may have been Gnostic. But that's really here nor
I've
there.
read such suggestions.
But what people don't realize is the Dead Sea Scrolls, that the monks who saved the Dead Sea Scrolls, they actually risked their lives to do that, and they died afterwards. They were killed off by the Romans right after they hidden those Dead Sea Scrolls. So it's not just something that should just be tossed off to the side. I mean, religious people actually gave their life to save those scriptures. But so, anyways, that's what I decided I would believe. And then one night I had this weird dream. I'm sorry. One night I had this weird dream, and it was just a voice, and the voice said, "It is true that the true God. It is true that the false God created your body, but the false God also created your soul. But the true God takes us as if we were a ball of clay and makes us into himself." And so that was the dream. It was just that voice. It was just the weirdest thing in the world. And so after that, I was like, okay. And so I've never questioned my salvation again after that, because apparently I got the answer. God takes us all and turns us in, and takes us all as if we were a ball of clay and makes us unto himself. So there I got the answer.
So it's a process of transformation.
Correct. And basically all of us, except for maybe the fake souls that the Gnostic scriptures talk about, and there are some here, fake souls, people not really human. And of course we know that.
Yeah, perhaps Hillary is one of them, but I shouldn't mention names, should I?
Yeah, she might be. That's quite possible. The way our world is set up, unfortunately, if you have a heart, you're probably not going to rise way up into the ranks. But if you don't have a heart, you'll probably be advanced up pretty high, because that's what it takes. You got to be able to step on people and use people, and et cetera, in order to rise up in the ranks and the way in the system that's set up the way it is now. And that could be Hindu because of the Antichrist, Dajjal, Satan, or whatever it is we want to call it, that seems to rule this world. But
so what else about your story? I mean, I keep going off on other tangents with cutting you off.
Oh no, you're fine. You're fine. Well, so that was. I've never found any kind of religion or scripture that teaches what I've been taught in that voice. That God created that the false God created our body and our soul. I haven't been able to find that anywhere. But still, I believe it, because, either you read books or you believe an experience you had, and that was an experience I had. And I have no indication. The Bible tells us that in dreams we learn things. This is what the scriptures teach us. So there's a place that's, and it was a pretty weird dream. So I believe it. But I haven't found any evidence of it. So it's kind of thrown me off. But I've never questioned my salvation since then. And I've decided that that all religions have truths. And to find them, you just match the pieces up and you'll find the truth. And then there's a lot of other things that are kind of thrown in there that may not be true. And you got to figure that one out for yourself. And basically, the truth is in the heart. And so if it doesn't feel right in the heart, then it probably isn't. And that's probably where we should go from there. So that's
I use love as the cornerstone. If it doesn't teach love and teach you to love even those that have a different point of view, that's the hard part.
Yes, it is.
You do your best to build the bridge. That doesn't mean you can force somebody to walk over the bridge, but you do your best to provide a means of connection and recognition of a connection.
Correct. Yep. And yeah, because that's where we mature. I mean, when we're young, we believe that everybody's supposed to be just like us, and then we realize that, well, everybody's different, and it's okay, and different is just as good as we are. And so, yeah, and still, I struggle with it sometimes myself. Someone's different, so you don't want to necessarily associate with them, but you have to try to. You have to try to build that bridge, and it's kind of difficult sometimes. It's a challenge. You got to swallow your pride, whatever. Sometimes, but it's always a challenge. But I've, as I explained to Ron earlier, I remember before I was born, and when I come across an atheist, I have quite a few atheist friends. One of the things that they'll always bring up is religious people believe stuff that are just make-believe. They have no evidence. And I always tell them, well, I remember before I was born. And of course, they may not believe that, but they at least respect me because I have at least some evidence. But as we know in faith, great are those who believe without seeing, rather than those who have seen. So on the religious side, I may not be such a great person for my faith, but then on the atheist side, they respect me because at least I have some evidence. But I do remember before I was born, and if you do some research on the internet, there's a few of us out there. It seems though that the story that they tell is very different than mine. We all seem to tell a different story. I'm not really sure what to make of that, but it was a place that was where lots of other people were there, and I don't recall seeing any faces in particular. But then again, my memory is kind of, it could be just that I don't remember. But there were lots of us there, and we all loved one another. And I always remember the scripture from Jesus where Jesus challenged the Sadducees, or the Sadducees challenged him about marriage, and he explained to them that you don't understand the scriptures, that in the kingdom of heaven you're neither given or taken. And yeah, that's one of the reasons why I left the Mormon church, because they believe marriage after death, that you're still married to somebody. And of course, I don't believe that, because as I recall, we all belonged to each other and no one belonged to no one. I mean, we were all mingled together and we all loved one another, and it was a very comfortable feeling. It was just a really comfortable, no stress or anything, just real comfortable feeling. And then I walked away from that, and there was this like hole, maybe, and it was like a window, and you could look into it and see the church, see the earth, but it just wasn't like a planet. You could just see what was going on the earth. And I can't remember any specifics, except that just a lot of awful, terrible things was going on there, just really scary, uncomfortable things. And then the very last thing I saw was the atomic explosion, the mushroom cloud coming out. And then this man comes walking towards me. And of course, when I was a child, I always thought it was Jesus, but now I really don't know who it was. But he comes walking towards me. And before he got to me, I knew why he was coming. I knew what he was going to say, but still I was hopeful. He had a white beard and mustache, and he come to me and he says, "It's time to go." And I'm like, no, after just seeing all that, I'm like, no, I don't want to go, but I didn't say that. I said nothing. No, I began to cry, and it just hurt me so much that my knees began to buckle, and he put his hand on my shoulder and said, "It'll be okay." And my life has been that way. I mean, someone has always protected me everywhere I was at, especially when I was in the Navy, because when I was in the Navy, I was the smallest person there was, and people always would protect me and fight for me and stand up for me, always. And so I've always been taken care of and protected. So I'm not rich, I'm not wealthy, I'm not a great leader, but I'm okay. And it's always been that way. My whole life has been okay. So that's my story. And I've always remembered that, but I've never told anybody until I was an adult, because when I was a kid, I figured, no one would believe you. Nobody believes kids anyway, so that would be why. But I got older and I'm like, gotta tell people and see what they think. And so far, no great objection. I mean, most people don't believe me, or they wonder if it's true. Yeah, I guess some respect from atheists. But I don't think I'm anything special. I think we were all there, but just for some reason, I remember. And for some crazy reason, I'm not sure why.
Yeah. Well, this is video 1. We'll maybe do another one in a couple weeks or whatever. And I appreciate you taking the time to introduce us to yourself, and we'll see where it goes from here.
All right.
Okay.
Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. Thank you. And as I say lots of times, namaste, or if it was with Valentine, aloha now. But thank you very much, Roger. Really appreciate it.
You're very welcome. Peace and love to all of you who are watching. Thank you.